Damas y caballeros, welcome back to From Across the Pond. Today we are lucky enough to be joined by journalist Peter Galindo to preview Toronto FC. How are you, Peter? And thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Rai. Thank you for having me on.
No problem at all. So first of all, I just wanted to talk about the international window that's just ended, with Canada all but securing a place at the World Cup at the end of this year, be that only their second ever appearance and first since 1986. So what does this mean to the country and the development of soccer in Canada?
There are a lot of people who still can't quite believe it, mostly because of just the pure domination they've shown throughout the entire qualifying cycle. No one in their wildest dreams could have imagined that they would be undefeated after 11 games, running away with the Ocho. There was some optimism that they could possibly qualify automatically for the World Cup just because that third spot may have been up for grabs, but no one could have foreseen this happening. And it could have massive ramifications for the country. You're seeing record TV ratings for the qualifying games. There's a lot more interest in general on social media. Just even when you walk past people on the street or you go to seven-a-side football matches, everybody's talking about the national team these days, which just never happened even about a year or two ago. So it's been quite the turnaround for the program.
Yeah, no, and the production of talent seems like it's going to continue coming through. One of the players who shone this window, especially in the US game as well, was Jonathan Osorio, a starting midfielder for Toronto FC. So getting back to Toronto, the club had a woeful 2021 season after the departure of Greg Vanney to the LA Galaxy. Toronto landed on Chris Armas to start that new cycle, and he was fired after 15 games. Javier Perez then took over for the rest of the season, in which Toronto ended up finishing second, bottom of the Eastern Conference. But obviously they were quick to make their move, and an ambitious move this offseason, bringing in Bob Bradley. And the club has become synonymous with the big moves across MLS. So how important was it for Toronto to make a big splash like this on a highly successful coach within MLS, especially off the back of such a disappointing season?
Yeah, there are many layers to it, I think. When you look at the Toronto sporting landscape, Toronto FC at their peak when they were winning MLS Cups and were probably by far and away the best team in the league for about a 2-3 year spell, they were, you could argue, maybe the number 3 team in the city, because of course you have the NBA, the NHL, MLB. So it is very tough sometimes to compete with those, massive conglomerates in North American sports. So just for that reason alone, I think they did need to do something, because some of the crowds towards the end of the season were just downright depressing to look at. So they definitely had to make some sort of impactful move, and bringing in Bob Bradley, I think was a really good start for that. Not just because of his MLS pedigree and the success he's had. Some could argue that maybe he underachieved at LAFC, but I feel like if you look at some things like the underlying numbers, I think they were let down by some pretty poor goalkeeping and just some unfortunate finishing. That shouldn't be too much of an issue, at least on the attacking end of the pitch, which I'm sure we'll get into. So it's definitely an ambitious move. It was a smart move for them to give him more control on the sporting side, because I feel like maybe there was a little discombobulation regarding, Armas and Ali Curtis and that sort of partnership there. So the fact that you now have a clear direction of where the club is going, and the fact that Bradley is bringing in players that he has signed off on, is a really good step.
No, absolutely. And I think just to get into your point about people perceiving his underachievement at LAFC, I think it's more about the style of play, I think, that they kind of created as well. Even though they weren't as successful as maybe they should have been, the style of play and the aesthetics of that created, a really good franchise, and a franchise that was competing at the top of MLS for a number of years.
For sure. And that was, I think, the biggest draw to bringing in Bradley, is that he is a guy who, even though he is synonymous with that fast-paced, possession-based style, he can adjust tactically. So, but I think that there is going to be a lot of emphasis placed on possession, just given how successful Toronto FC was under Greg Vanney, who liked to keep the ball a lot, but also move the ball quickly. And I think you're going to see more of that under Bradley for sure.
No, absolutely. And we can't talk about the Bob Bradley rebuild and reinvigoration without mentioning star signing Lorenzo Insigne. The Italy and Napoli star will be joining in the summer. And Toronto have previously been at the forefront of bringing quality players to MLS, but this move feels almost revolutionary, as it's like truly the first world-class player in their pomp at the peak of their powers to move to the league. So what does this move mean for Toronto and MLS?
Well, it's massive. You really cannot discredit that. And I think it's a really smart move considering how many Italian Canadians live in Toronto, and who are still going to be riding the high of the Euro 2020 victory, who are going to recognize Insigne, because there are actually a surprising amount of Napoli fans in Toronto. So I think they're going to really latch onto that. But for MLS as a whole, yeah, I mean, it's a massive coup. Yes, they had to probably overpay him in order to lure him over here. But regardless, if you have the money to do it and the player's willing to come over, then you can't knock it. And it could end up being maybe a bit of a change, because you're starting to see a lot more players, especially as they suffer more devastating injuries and they're starting to play a lot more games these days. They might see that paycheck in their late 20s, early 30s and say, well, listen, we can get some financial security here. Our career is short. It could end at any time. Maybe we take that chance. And a lot of players do like to vacation in, Miami, California. They love New York in some cases. So for those reasons alone, plus the money factor, they may end up choosing to come over here, maybe not so much in their primes, but certainly in and around where Insigne's age range is, in like that 30-31 range.
Yeah, no, and I think getting to the community aspect that you talked about is so important to have, that to allow him to settle in, because obviously they've got previous experience with Giovinco on the positive side, but then in 2014, alongside Michael Bradley, they brought in Jermaine Defoe, who obviously was in his prime as well, but it didn't work out because he didn't settle there. So how important is that Italian community and the fact that they've got that proof of concept with Giovinco as well?
Yeah, it's massive for sure. And that him and Jovinko, I'm talking about Insigne, of course, have discussed, what Toronto is like, maybe where the best cafes are to go, the best Italian bakeries to go to get your nice fresh baked bread, things like that. Those little things do matter. So I think it's going to be massive for him. And they'll definitely make him feel right at home. There are times when you go into Little Italy in Toronto and you honestly feel like you're back in Italy in some cases. So I think it'll definitely help them for sure, that they won't, I think, experience another Defoe debacle.
No, that's good. Hopefully that's the way it goes for the club. And another massive move they've made, getting another DP, is they brought in Carlos Salcedo, the talented Mexican defender from Tigres, in a swap deal that sent Jefferson Salcedo to the Mexican club. What can Salcedo bring to a back line and a team that conceded the second most goals in the league last season?
That was by far and away their most pressing need, was just defensive replacements, especially after Richie Larea left for Nottingham Forest, of course. Yes, they had Auro to kind of fill in for him as need be, but center back was a problem area. And when you're only relying on really Chris Mavinga as being your only solid center back, and he does have problems with injuries at times, that was the one area you had to address. Bringing in Salcedo is good because he has the pedigree. He's used to MLS, of course, having played for Real Salt Lake in the past. And obviously his experience with the Mexican national team is huge. Whether he is the perfect fit may remain to be seen, because there are times in certain situations when he's defending 1v1 where he can be a little prone to more technically gifted, faster, shiftier attackers. But he's comfortable playing in a high line. He's comfortable on the ball, which is massive if Bradley wants to play with that possession-based style. And he can settle in nicely next to Mavinga. And you have a backup in Lucas McNaughton now, who can fill in admirably and is comfortable in that system as well. So the depth defensively is looking quite solid, when after the season ended, you could say, my God, this is a mess.
Yeah. And they brought in Shane O'Neill, isn't it, from Seattle as well, to help reinforce that back line. But like you say, Salcedo, I think, having watched Tigres a lot because I lived in Monterrey, they're good on the ball, and he's good on the ball, and he should help Brad Bradley in his possession-oriented system, like you were saying, to build from the back. Another big name, obviously, it's all about big names this offseason with Toronto, is Jozy Altidore on his way out after his relationship soured with the club. Is this a big loss for the team, or due to his injuries, is it something that they're happy, it's kind of a mutual agreement to part ways? And will Toronto be able to cope without their second all-time top goal scorer?
There's so many layers to this, I feel, because certainly he had his success in Toronto. Obviously, he was integral to those two playoff runs in 2016 and 17, scored some big goals in 2018 during their Champions League run, formed that really good partnership with Jovinko. But towards the end of his time with TFC, injuries did plague him, as they often have throughout his career. For that reason alone, I think it was a necessary move. You do have Akinola, which I think is going to be a really interesting player to watch this year. But in terms of Altidore, I was a little surprised that TFC signed him to a long-term deal. What would it have been? I think entering the 2019 season. Because just given his injury history, and yes, he's an effective goal scorer when healthy, but given that he was entering that kind of 30-31 range and his peak was only just going to go down from there, it was a bit of a surprising move. Now MLSC are mega wealthy. I don't think they mind having to buy him out or, having to eat some money, but from a sporting aspect, it was a bit of a curious move, but sometimes nostalgia can be powerful.
No, exactly. And talking about Akinola, who looks to be the man to fill that void, like you said, does he have what it takes to lead the line effectively over the course of the whole season? Because obviously in 2020 we saw him fill in the MLS's back tournament. He shone there, but the most minutes he's ever logged is 1,063, which was in 2020. Does he have the ability to carry that over the months of the season?
Yeah, this is the big question for him because, as you said, he certainly took MLS's back by storm and then finished the entire 2020 season on a real high. And you were looking at him and thinking, wow, like this guy's 20 years old. He, the beginning is only just starting for him. And then he suffers that offseason ankle injury. He comes back. He looks noticeably unfit. Let's just put it that way. Now, there were reports out there that he was dealing with a mild heart issue, which might have contributed to this. But in the moments where Akinola did get a regular run in 2021 with Soteldo on the pitch, with Alejandro Pozzuelo on the pitch, you could see the quality come back. He's a very good penalty box poacher, right? He makes those off the ball runs very incisively, latches onto those balls into the box, and just gets into quality positions every single time. And that's his strength. But if he loses a step or two with his pace, he doesn't become as effective. So that's going to be the big question coming into this year is how fit is he? Can he get that burst of speed back? And therefore, can he stay fit enough to get more than 1,000 minutes that he got in 2020? And whether Toronto FC ends up signing a DP striker, they've obviously been linked to Andrea Bellotti. Can he be the guy to lead the line for them? You imagine once you get Insigne in the summer, there's going to be enough weapons around him to be able to feed him properly. But even before that, there's still some pretty quality pieces in the side to be able to supply Akinola. And who knows, if he can get somewhere around 8-9 goals by the halfway point of the season, I think you absolutely take that.
No, absolutely. And like you said, there should be the weapons available to Toronto to be supplying him. One of those is Alejandro Pozzuelo, like you said. And obviously the 2020 MVP of the league. He saw a dip in form like most of his teammates last year. But what does Rob Bradley need to do to get him ticking again? And is he Toronto's most important player, at least until Insigne shows up in the summer?
Yes, for sure he would be. I think the key for Pozzuelo is just stay fit. And sometimes that's easier said than done. But when he is fit and when he is firing, he's among the best players in the league, certainly in his position. Ranks in the somewhere like the 90th to 95th percentile in metrics like expected assists, shot creating actions. He's obviously a pretty lethal goal scorer himself too. So when he is fit, he shows his quality. That's really the biggest question for him. So he will be the most important player for them, no question about it, because without him, I'm not too sure where the chance creation is going to come from. That's where Toronto FC kind of really struggled without him. Was defensively at times they actually did kind of solve their problems after Javier Perez came in. But it was just a question of, well, where are the assists going to come from? Where are the balls into the box going to come from? At times it was really just Jefferson Soteldo, who actually had a pretty decent season considering. But without Pozzuelo there to kind of shoulder the workload, you saw the ramifications of it.
No, and Where do you think he's going to fit into the system for Rob Bradley? Because obviously in LAFC, he is versatile tactically, but in
Right.
LAFC, it was mostly a 4-3-3 with the penetration and the assists and the technical plays coming from the wingers with Vea and Rossi, mostly. So where do you see Pozuelo fitting in? Maybe is it a change of shape, not a 4-3-3, or maybe an advanced 8?
Yeah, I would imagine there would have to be a tactical switch. I would actually have to go back and look at some of their friendlies, but I believe they've actually been experimenting with a 4-2-3-1 with a number 10. So that would obviously be very beneficial for him. He has played on the wing at times. He has played a little deeper at times too. I suppose you could line it up in a way where you almost have two holders and behind him, and you still kind of go 4-3-3-ish, but he just kind of goes up and down because he does track back defensively and helps out, which is going to be a major staple under Bob Bradley. You would imagine no player is going to be able to get away with taking a break whenever the team loses possession. So I could see it going that way too, but it looks like he's going to be flexible to try and accommodate Pozuelo into the team, as he should, because as we have both said, he is going to be quite an important player.
No, absolutely. And depth will be key if Toronto are going to make a march up that Eastern Conference this season. So there's talk about the atomic ant Sebastian Giovinco returning to Toronto. Is there anything in this rumored return to the Six? And is it sentimental, or could he still be a contributor at his age?
I think there is something to this. The rumblings have been out there for, I believe, the last 2 or 3 months. And where there's smoke, there's fire. And the fact that Jovinko is willing to accept a TAM contract, which means that you wouldn't have to use a DP spot on him, of course. And the fact that he is still a pretty good player at 34, 35 years of age, even if he was just, a rotational option up front and, could kind of, maybe he could even help Akinola in a way as well. I would do it personally if I was Toronto FC. And plus, it maybe would help Insigne settle into the team a bit more easily, having a fellow Italian with them. So I think it's a move that could end up happening. I'm sure they're going to explore it very, very seriously. Whether it comes off, we'll see, but there is certainly something to this. He wouldn't be in preseason training, I don't think, if there was anything to it, especially with them kind of blowing it up on social media and like, oh, hey, look, the atomic ant is back and everything. So I think they're maybe also trying to see if, what the fan reaction would be.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier Andrea Borlotti and the potential signing of him. Do you think that Toronto are looking for a number 9, or if you, like you said earlier, if Akinola reaches the halfway point with nearly double figures in goals, are they going to maybe sideline that in for the offseason next year?
They obviously have to offload a DP, and there was it wasn't credible at all, but there was a report out there that said that Pozuelo had an offer from China. Now, I don't think there was anything to it. No one at the club seemed to really take it seriously. So we'll just say that that's nonsense for now. But that would be the first key, of course, would be offloading a DP spot. And you would imagine Pozuelo might be the easiest one to offload, I suppose, just because he'd be the one who's been there the longest. And he's still at an age where you could probably get something for him in terms of a transfer fee and whatnot. So that would be the first step. The second step would be, well, how fit is Akinola? How well is he doing? Is he integrating back into the team well? Is he gelling with everybody? I think if he is, that might be something they could explore possibly during the offseason next year, maybe even the summer of 2023. Because there were offers for Akinola from Europe, but he ultimately chose to take the richest homegrown deal in, I'm not sure if it was MLS history or Toronto FC history, but it was a lot of money for sure for a player who's only been in the league for a couple of years. I think the goal is get Akinola firing, see if he can get fit again. If you can sell him in the summer, maybe then that could be the plan, but I could see him sticking around for a full season, and then they kind of capitalize on that, sell him overseas, and then maybe reshuffle the team to try and bring in another DP striker.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you say, he's going to be one of the breakout players if Toronto are going to be successful this season. But who else could be a breakout player for the club this season? Obviously, I don't know if you think he's going to get any minutes, but Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty was training with Liverpool this offseason. Yep. Is he in line maybe for some minutes, or is there another youngster that could be a breakout player?
If he sticks around, I think he very well could be. And what's interesting is last year there were times when he was playing as more of a right back. So they're almost doing what I think a lot of Canadian wingers have kind of gone through, and that they've moved further back into the team, but they've integrated well in a wing back, fullback type role. If he ends up playing there, I could actually see him having a bit of an impact. Another one I'm really intrigued to see is how Ralph Priso gets on after his injury. It was devastating timing because he was only just getting into real good form. He's still 19 years old, so the sky is very much the limit for him. And one of the reasons why Toronto FC offloaded Marky Delgado to the LA Galaxy is they believe in Priso as well as Noble Okello, who could maybe end up making another step this year. And he has to, given that he is 21 and, it's kind of now or never for him. But Priso's another one who I think could end up having a real impact this year. If he comes back, the injury has no effect on him, and he kind of picks up where he left off.
And lovely. And then talking about predictions, where we see the team this year, obviously a return to the playoffs is a must for the team, especially given the off-season moves. Do you see them challenging maybe the top seeds in the playoffs? And then obviously there's a return of the US. Oh no, they're not in the US Open Cup. I apologize. But the return to the playoffs. Do you think that's must, and maybe in the top 4 seeds? Do you see them?
Yeah, I think hosting a home game would probably be the expectation for them. They could certainly challenge the top 2-3 seeds in the East. The East is quite diverse. I feel like it could go either way, at least at this point in time. I do think that they're going to start out somewhat slowly just because of all the changes they've gone through. The fact they're going to be learning Bradley's system. They don't have the Champions League this year to kind of get their feet wet. So they may struggle out of the gates early, but eventually once they integrate Insigne and even just the individual quality he's going to have might even, win them some games where they maybe don't deserve it. I think they'll eventually consolidate 3rd, 4th place in the East, maybe leaning more towards 3rd place, because they will have the quality to beat a lot of teams when they don't look good on their day. And that alone might push them up the table, because as we know in MLS, you put together a 3, 4, 5 match unbeaten run, all of a sudden you go from 7th to 2nd, or, what have you. So that could end up having a major factor here.
No, absolutely. And of course, Nashville FC are moving over to the Western Conference, who were a top 3 seed last year. So that's obviously beneficial to Toronto. But Peter, I just want to say thank you very much for joining us and giving us your insight today. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we talk again soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.